What's happening?
Women are able to fight on the front lines.
Okay, so we're making changes for women to be able to fight in ground combat roles. 2 years ago, what happened in the military?
Don't ask, don't tell was repealed.
Don't ask, don't tell was repealed, exactly. Do you guys know when the first female fighter pilot was recognized in the United States Air Force? You have any idea? It's actually kind of a magic number for me. Also 20 years ago, 1993, when I commissioned. So I want you to think about that for just a second. Where are all my seniors? Raise your hands. All right, so all of you seniors, you all are about to commission and become officers in the U.S. Air Force, just like these gentlemen were. You all are going to be second lieutenants very soon. You will not know an Air Force. There will never be a time in your service to our country where you were not allowed to stand shoulder to shoulder with another person, regardless of their gender, regardless of their color, their race, even their sexual orientation. These gentlemen came in on the ground floor of building that foundation for you. So again, take this opportunity, think about what that means to you as future officers, as future leaders. We talk a little bit about some of these issues about overcoming some of those injustices and inequalities when we talk about the significance of Black History Month. But we're also building leaders here as well. So you've got two dyed-in-the-wool Air Force leaders in front of you too. So remember, we're here for your professional development, not just as officers, but future leaders. So I'm going to say anything's fair game. So give it a shot, everybody.
Sir Cadet Clemens, Bravo Flight. What were your experiences like adjusting to civilian life and dealing with segregation when you came back to the States?
I didn't quite hear that my hearing's not.
What was life like adjusting to civilian life while dealing with segregation back at home?
Oh, from my standpoint, there was no adjustment at that point, because growing up, I went to integrated schools from the time I was in first grade, so that part didn't bother me. The part that did bother me was when I was in the service, and the segregation there, where you couldn't go here, you couldn't go there, and in particular when we became officers, you couldn't even take advantage of the officers' club, swimming pool, or any other things that they had on the base for the officers that we had to fight for. But fortunately, that only happened to me in my last few months in the service, and that was one of the reasons I was mustered out so soon, because there were a group of 51 of us down in Monroe, Louisiana, that couldn't go to the officers' club and could only use the swimming pool after everyone else had used it. Then they would wash it out, and they would use it again for 6 days, then we could go in. No one wanted to do that. So they wrote a letter to the Inspector General and had him come down to Louisiana. Our demand was either correct the situation here or give us our discharge and we can go home. After the Inspector General came down, the commanding officer was very much upset. Following the Inspector General leaving the base, the first order of business for the commanding officer was to get rid of all of the black officers that he had there. So we were the first group to be mustered out. That was one of the fields where the officers coming back from overseas, they stayed there until there was space at their home, the base near their home, where they could be mustered out. We got first choice on there. That was the first time we ever had first choice on anything. And as a result, I was out, I guess I was one of the first ones in my community to come home. And that was in September of '45. And not long after the war ended. That answer the...
Sir.
Yeah. And incidentally, to go on one more thing, The fellows that I went to high school with, this was integrated high school, Tilden Tech, if you know. Just recently, our 70th anniversary from graduation. We graduated in 1942, and we had our 70th anniversary, and there were about 20 of us left here in the city of Chicago out of 367. So, I was the only black in that group. All the rest of them have gone by the wayside. When I graduated, I think there were less than 24 blacks in our graduating class, and I guess I'm the only one left there. So, and that's about it.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Chris Stein, Cadet Wound Vice Commander. Colonel touched on it, and then the video touched on it too, about changes that are taking place in the Air Force, the military in general. But did you have any idea of the progress that you were a part of while you were serving? How did it feel, or just did you have any idea that you were going to be part of something that was so large and so significant?
Well, I started with, from my standpoint, no. I had no idea at the time. When I got out of the service, we started a group that ultimately became Tuskegee Airmen. There was a small group that used to meet at one of the airmen's father had a funeral home there in Chicago, and we would meet there in the evening. And I was there for a short time, but I had a lot on my plate, and I didn't follow through with it because I had other priorities at the time.
I have to be very careful because I'm a very emotional person. I don't mean to trivialize what you're doing. But yeah, I didn't have the same experience. When I was in the service and I was at Tuskegee, I saw very little segregation. The reason for that is that Tuskegee was a black base, so how are you going to segregate when almost everybody was black? We had a few white instructors, and as you saw in that excellent editing of that double victory, Noel Parrish was the commander. The training was tough. All that stuff that they say happened. During the time of my training, I didn't experience that, as I said, because there was nobody to segregate against. When I got out, I did experience it. And as I mentioned earlier, I thought I was really the cat's meow, and I got my wings, and I have relatives in Atlanta, Georgia, which isn't too far from Tuskegee. And I was going to go up there and I had my uniform on, and I was going to go and show them how great their relative was. And I drove with one of the guys that had a car and took us to Atlanta. And my folks lived in Chamblee, which is on the outskirts, now part of Atlanta. I got on the bus to make the rest of the trip, and they made me sit in the back of the bus. That incident wasn't worth all this, but I'm just saying it to give you an example that was there. And it lasts until this day. Let me stop there. We've come a long way, and we've still got a way to go. I like the cut at the end of that editing. It said something about she's not perfect. But I'll hold her in here. Rescue me.
Does that answer your question?
My question will be in the streets form of apology. People say I don't look it, but I'm well past 91. I'm older than these gentlemen. And I was a part of the training of the Tuskegee fighter pilots. After they graduated from Tuskegee, those who survived, as you gentlemen have pointed out, the lucky ones, went on to fighter school. This was later in the war, and training at that time was in P-47s, not in the P-41s that the others grew. But I was base photo officer, I was very green second lieutenant, and not in command of my fate, as all of you will soon find out who are about to become second lieutenants. And our job, among our jobs in the photo lab, was to do the gun camera film for the trainee pilots. They flew their heavy P-47s at night and shot at tow targets behind ships. Very often I rode along in the two-place tow target. I've been dived on by more P-47 by Tuskegee pilot trainees probably than anybody in history. And they never hit me, nor did they try. But at any rate, the purpose of that was to see whether they were marksmen, whether they could fight and go through the gyrations that fighter pilots need to do in combat. And so they were scored. We did the gun camera film. There were gun cameras attached to the machine guns that fired, and so we had film records in these white targets and recorded that. The other thing we did, which was a little unusual and allowed me to meet many of these pilots, was that before they left, after they had almost finished their training, they came by the lab, and we had a closet full of shirts and coats and neckties, and they put those on. Everybody was happy for 1 minute out of the Army, believe me. And we took civilian pictures, passport pictures, which they put in their survival kits, so that if they were shot down in a foreign country, they had a chance to make up false papers and escape. But what I really wanted to say was that the discrimination has been an issue in the film and in the discussion here. And I was a part of that, and I've been ashamed of it all my life. I was a country boy from northern Indiana. I didn't know anything about the South. And second lieutenants, again, as you'll find out, don't get to change procedures very much. So I went along, and the black trainees had a separate club. They couldn't come in our white club. There were other things, I won't detail it. But this has rankled me all my life after I learned what it meant and what it was about. And I never thought, I've done a little writing about this in an autobiography that is in preparation, but I never thought I would get a chance to apologize in person to Tuskegee pilots. And this is my chance, and I couldn't resist it. I'm so sorry for what we unknowingly did. You are gentlemen of the highest order. I respect you, and I'm proud to be here today. Thank you.
You mentioned that flying a total target. That brings back the experience that I had at Tyndall Field. While I was waiting to go to Bombardier School, they had a group of us go to Tyndall Field for gunnery training, flexible gunnery training. Here again, so they'd have gunners available in the bomber. And we were trained in either the B-17 or the B-24. The small guys like myself, I was in the B-24, the bubble turret underneath, where you lie on your back and the ground is down there, and you have the gun in front of you. But I can vividly remember the first time I flew and had to shoot at the tow target. The way you would do that, you would pick up the plane that was carrying the tow target, and then you would move back to get the the toll that they were carrying. And the tendency would be to start shooting a little too soon before you got there. And it just seemed like the line between what they were towing and the plane they were flying was very short. So there were times I think there were bullets flying around the plane. That I'm sure of. So, but unfortunately, I was never hit anyone. It was never that good.
I can't understand why I ever flew on all those things, because I didn't have to. I thought it was fun. Thanks that you guys missed me.
I don't think I would want to fly a plane towing a target, because that's dangerous.
Excuse me. My name is Robert Motley, and I'm from Tuskegee, and you were an inspiration to me as a kid. When I graduated from high school in 1950, I went to the Air Force, and from 50 to 54, when I got out, I went to college. Everything had to be for me at the time was black schools. So when the Air Force was integrated, I came back to the segregated area. So I lived through that. But you were an inspiration to me, and I appreciate what you all did.
Your question?
I'm not a pilot. My name is Paola Talapero, and when I graduated from Virginia State College in 1947, my first job was at Tuskegee Institute. And you all were gone by that time, but your hangar was there, and we used it. We went there when the musicians came to town and so forth. But I will tell you one thing. The first time I was in an airplane, it was by one of these Tuskegee Air people who took me up there and almost scared me to death. But it's very nice to see you. Thank you.
You mentioned Tuskegee and the airport there, Moulton Field, that the captain mentioned a while ago, where we took our primary training. It still exists. Not only does it exist, it's now a national monument. I may have the wrong terminology, but it's a national monument site sort of thing. They have a museum there, and the field is still there. The Army Air Force Base is no longer there, but Moulton Field is still there. And Tuskegee Institute, as it was then, is now a Tuskegee University. Come a long way. Are there other questions? Lady here.
Yes, what was your greatest motivation that kept you pushing through all the odds in this relationship?
In my case, I guess it's the fact that I always wanted to fly since 12 years old. I can remember specifically. And in high school, I was a member of the Civilian Air Patrol CAPS, and then in the service, I just wanted to fly, and that's all the motivation I needed. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to continue to do that, but decided by someone I spoke to in the last day or so. That was 69 years ago. You guys weren't even a twinkle in anybody's eye at that time. So, you know, it's nice to be sitting up here and enjoying the accolades that you folks are bestowing upon us. And it's just a gas. I never thought of it. Someone said earlier, what did you think it would ever get to be anything like this? Certainly not. That wasn't part of what we were planning to do. We just wanted to fly, or to be involved in flying. And luckily, there was a long spate in between where there was no recognition. And in the last few years, the recognition has come, and we appreciate it. So, in the old days, the only way I'd have been in this room is I would be cleaning it up or serving it. Here you got me in front today. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Oh, we're not gonna let you off that.
No, I don't have a question for you. You're 87? but I'm 86.
I'm 88.
I'm in. All right, then I'll sit down and shut up.
I'm 82.
Yeah, Bob's the youngest.
He's a youngster.
Yeah, 82. Yeah. I want to speak to these young folks just briefly. I came to Indiana University in June, 1 week after I graduated from high school in Gary, Indiana at Gary Roosevelt. I came on a football scholarship. As of today, I am the only football player in the history of Indiana University to make All-American each year I played. And the state of Indiana did not permit me to play against people that looked like you in high school. I played against only African-American teams around the Midwest, and I played against Bloom Township. And as a result, I was recruited as a football player by 2 schools in the United States. The University of Illinois and UCLA, because of Jackie Robinson's career there, along with the first 2 African Americans to play in the National Football League. It was hell living in Bloomington, Indiana, going to college. And I called my dad after 2 weeks on this campus to tell him I didn't want to go to Indiana University. And he, with a 4th grade education, said, one question, if I may. Is there another reason that you're in Bloomington, Indiana? And he hung the telephone up. I lie in that bed that night and figured it out. He and my mother had told me every day of the first 18 years of my life 2 things. We love you, you must be educated. I saw white people in Gary, Indiana, in a school setting twice a year when the board of directors of the Department of Education met at my high school. Otherwise, nothing. And as I told Brother Wilt, there were 4 men that lived in the neighborhood in which I lived that became Tuskegee Airmen. And so you guys were our heroes.
Thank you.
Today, at 86 years of age, I can go. This is the first time in my life I've been in this building because it was not permitted. I took the sign that said colored off of the theaters in the city of Bloomington, Indiana, when I came back from service. For one reason, I wasn't going to let white people tell me what to do, because I had served this country. And I was playing football. I am the first African American to play the position of quarterback in professional football. You mean to tell me you think of all the African American people that ever lived prior to and during my time that I was better than? No. It was simply an idea whose time had come. I say to all of you, come down off of your mighty high horse of being white and look at other people who look like you, who walk like you, and who talk like you. Because you're not better than unless you prove it. And I am one of the people in this city that says what I actually think and feel. And my wife says that's the truth. No. You guys don't have any idea what you meant to people like me. And God bless you.
Thank you.
If I may, along those lines, I am the first African American to become a member of this organization, American Legion. I joined down at the old one, so we moved up here in 1969. But I'm the first one African American to be a member of the American Legion. And I'm a life member.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Ken Machiaski, I'm the wing commander. Gentlemen, I had a question. As part of our ROTC cadets, we work on the professional development as leaders. In your training before you joined the service, what is the one leadership aspect that you've learned that's the most important, and why is that one? Each of you could give an answer to that.
Well, from my standpoint, when I was 12 years old, and you had to be 12 in order to become a Boy Scout. And I think the training that I received as a scout coming up was the training that was necessary for any boy or girl, they had Girl Scouts at that time, to prepare you for the future, how to treat people, as well as how to lead people. And the training you receive there, at least what I received, I think did me quite well. I've had very few problems in areas where I had to take a leadership role. And I was always grateful for not only the Boy Scouts, but I was an altar boy at my church. And I had the priest in charge there was a very strict taskmaster. He was fair, but he demanded excellence from all who served. And at the time it seemed a little rough, but as I grew older I realized that what he was doing was the right thing, and it carried me through. And I had very few problems with anyone that I had to direct or lead.
I was hoping you wouldn't hand me this thing. I don't have a reasonable answer to that. I don't think I learned anything about leadership in the service. In the Air Force pilot training, the concentration was on trying to learn to fly the aircraft. As I mentioned before, 2/3 of everyone who went into that were washed out. Every move you made, every study period you had to do with getting past that next examination. And in the end, they produced some pilots. They did not work too much on your character. You probably would not have been there if you didn't have enough character to be there. However, whatever character I had was formed by my association with my parents and the years in high school and with the church in my adulthood and as a youth. But I can't give the military credit for whatever I have, nor can I blame them for whatever I have in that regard. So I think I'd better let it go at that.
Thank you.
If I may, before we turn over the board, you can ask your question. I have to take just slight issue with that. You gave me a card last night and a picture of a pretty cool looking aircraft on it. And it looked like there were spots for a crew, a lot more than just the pilot. What sort of interaction did you have in some of those older airframes? I mean, you had to have gunners, didn't you? I assume you had a navigator. Did you have bombardiers? Weren't there some other people in the aircraft besides just you?
Okay,
He's gonna
let me
say
take
no,
that.
watch.
Let me take that. Answer, Colonel, no. As I mentioned, that was a training plane. It was a tactical aircraft, but it was just a trainer for us. And there were no gunners, no bombardiers, anything else in that aircraft except another pilot. And one of the big thrills was that after you became fairly accomplished in the thing, you'd go up with it, you and another student, and you got this great big airplane. And it was a toy after you got used to handling it. But there were no other people in there. I guess they didn't want to kill any navigators or anything like that.
Well, and I retract my information.
One thing, since I've got this going here, people think of the Tuskegee Airmen as being the pilots of the 99th and the 332nd, and all the heroic things that they did, and that's great, wonderful, should be as it is. However, Tuskegee Airmen also include those people that keep those guys up there. I'm a pilot, so I can say this and not have it look like we're polishing the apple. But I didn't go over there, and I didn't have to fight, and I didn't duck any bullets, and none of my buddies got shot down. I did all of my service in the South. And therefore, I'm riding the coattails of those same guys from the 99th and the 332nd. And to keep any one of those pilots in the air, it takes at least 10 people on the ground. They too are Tuskegee Airmen. And we've got to make a big point of getting that over. And the gunners that you mentioned, and the navigators and all the other guys, they too are the Tuskegee Airmen. Other question? Did I answer that? Or should I have shut up earlier? Yes.
Sir, Cadet Doyle, Inspector General. First of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be standing in a room with such great, brave, strong, and obviously very humble individuals. But my question is, when September 11th occurred, a lot of people went out and signed up to join and serve in the military. But what was it like during a world war to sign up and put your name on the dotted line and say, I'm willing to fight?
Okay, this is not going to fly well. I was a draft dodger. Don't hit me. No, it's not as bad as that sounds. My friend Louis Irons and I were good buddies in high school, and when we got out of high school, we wanted to fly. If you waited until you graduated, you got drafted and you got sent wherever there was a need. And in order to dodge that draft, in that regard, we signed up for the Air Force before we graduated, took the test and all that stuff. So by the time that we graduated, we were already, I think he tells me we were inducted. But in any event, we left there on a train going to, I think it was Rantoul first and then on to Keesler Field. So in that regard, I'm a draft dodger. I wanted to go to the Air Force, and in order to do that, we had to sign up early and we volunteered. So that's how I got there. Do you have a response to that?
Yes, I was drafted, ultimately. As I said before, when I graduated from high school, I was naive enough to believe that if I went to college, that I would perhaps get a deferment so I could finish my education. That wasn't the case. So I spent the next semester in school, I was working during the day, and incidentally, back then I was paid $65 a month as a lab assistant at a glue factory over on the west side of Chicago. And I would leave there at 5 o'clock and go to school, and I spent 3 to 4 hours in school for that semester. The money that I was making working paid for my schooling and bought me a pair of shoes and maybe a shirt every now and then. So, no, I didn't volunteer, but my name was on the draft, and when it came up, I went.
Sir, Cadet Schmidt's Alpha Flight. I was wondering, since you've seen so much of the history of the Air Force, what changes would you like to see in the future? You mentioned that we have a long way to go. What would you like to see?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, I don't have an excellent answer. What would I like to see? I think we're moving in the right direction. As the Colonel mentioned, the lady pilots, fighter pilots. I remember seeing about something, I admire, you guys talk about how nice it is to be a pilot. I admire the Navy guys who have to land their planes on that cotton-picking aircraft carrier. You take off from a field that's too short in the first place, you go and do whatever it is your mission has been, and when you come back, the field is no longer there. When you find it, it's so short you can't land on it without having some arresting cables. And you don't really land, you just crash on the deck and the cables catch you. If they don't, you're in the drink, so. I don't know how I got that far into that, but yeah, there are things that requires an answer that's much more serious than I am at this point. I'm not qualified to answer that. Would you like to give it a shot?
I can elaborate a little more. I think the ROTC program, excuse me, program that is co-ed is probably the closest thing you could probably get to making the transition between now and the real world of aviation or the real world of the Air Force, because I have seen many instances where the interaction between the male and female left a lot to be desired. And I think if you get that interaction early enough, then later on, it's my belief that the problems will be minimized. That's it for me. Any more questions? Oh.
Cadet Bryce, Bravo Flight. You seem to be real passionate about the flying that you've had experience with. Could you kind of just go into further detail about the planes that you were flying and how it was to fly?
Well, to go back, I'm not a pilot, and my first love to begin with when I went in the Air Corps was navigation, because my background at that point, I was, I guess you might say a math major. That was the thing that I loved. And I think that navigation was as close to that as you could possibly come. I didn't reach that navigation because I went to bombardier school first. And, but not having, I have flown, as I said before, up to a certain point, and but not to the extent where I could really say that that was my love of the Air Corps.
Well, as my view of it is that I love to fly, and you know, I forgot to give me your question again. I thought I had an answer.
Could you go into further detail as to how it felt to be in those planes, like about which ones were your favorite and such?
Okay, yeah, okay, it led me back. I flew a B-25 in the end, but the other planes, the Texan and so forth, were more fun to fly, even the primary trainer, because you could fly all over the sky, do crazy things, and have a ball. I remember the first plane that I mentioned that we flew was the PT-17, Airmen biplane, fabric covered, and Charles Johnson, my first instructors, gave me the initial flight. They take you for a ride, and the guy says, "How you like all this?" and so on. The instructor's sitting up front, and you're sitting in the seat back behind him. And he says, "Here, you got the control, do whatever you'd like to do." Well, having had the interest in aviation, I thought I knew how to do some of the things that I'd seen these guys do. And so I was going to do a slow roll. And I put the stick over and put a little rudder in it. The thing turned upside down, but I didn't know how to get it the rest of the way. And Charlie, there's a mirror up there. The instructor can look and see the student in the back. And he almost fell out of the plane because they didn't expect that. You know, you give somebody the control of anything for the first time, you're not going to do a violent acrobatic stunt. And so he's hanging about halfway out of the airport because when he reached to get, just as I did, when he reached to get the control, he hit his safety belt and his seat belt popped loose. So he's hanging on by the throttle and the stick, partway out of the cockpit, and he's looking at me and cussing in the mirror. Fortunately, I couldn't hear him because the intercom system popped loose as well. And I didn't know how to roll out, as I mentioned, so the only thing I knew how to do was to split this out. And I pulled back on the stick, and the thing came out like that, as all of you know, being pilots and people. We got back, he grabbed the stick, and what they used to do if you didn't do what you were supposed to do, they would take the stick between your legs and they'd do like that and bat your legs with it. And he batted my legs a few times and said, "Take me back to the airfield," with a few choice words in between. And as we taxied down the ramp coming back to the hangar, he was telling everybody, "This so-and-so tried to kill me." But it's that kind of thing that I remember. It was fun. It was mentioned earlier, the P-40 was one of the early trainers of the guys who were trained before me. And at the end of the day, we used to go down and sit on a little rise at the end of the runway when the guys who were flying these P-40s, they were advanced pilots at the time, were coming back at the end of the day. And most aircraft, the retracting gear either is out here like that and it folds under, or maybe it folds straight back. On the P-40, the thing has a complex folding mechanism. It folds in and back at the same time like that. And they have a tendency to not want to do the same thing at the same time. Sometimes the left one folds, sometimes the right one folds, sometimes you'd have two sticking out. Invariably, there'd be somebody coming in with an emergency sort of landing at the end of the day. And we'd go down there and watch to see how it was going to happen, whether he was going to hit the thing and skid down the runway or ground loop it or what. And that was our adventure for the day. So, you have various things. Those are some of the highlights. As a B-24 pilot, B-25 pilot, we used to fly close formation. I guess the biggest thing you can do in a B-25 that's any kind of a thrill is to overlap the wingtips, and that's about it. You don't roll it. If anybody saw the movie Flight, by the way, and this guy takes a big jet airliner and flies upside down, thriller.
You'll have to excuse me, I have to go and straighten my tie. I'll be back.
Wingman left. Yes, sir. Anybody?